Sarah Martinez stood outside the glass doors of the police training facility at exactly 6 in the morning. Her hands were slightly shaking, but not from the cold October air. Today was the day she had been waiting for since she first put on her police uniform 3 years ago. Today she would begin training for the Elite Tactical Response Unit. She had dreamed about this moment countless times. The tactical unit was the best of the best. They handled the most dangerous criminals in the city. Bank robberies, hostage situations, drug raids, and high-speed chases. Only the smartest and strongest officers made it through their training program. Out of 50 applicants this year, only 12 had been selected for the program. Sarah took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy doors. The training facility smelled like leather, gun oil, and sweat. Rows of exercise equipment lined one side of the massive room. A shooting range stretched across the back wall. In the center, obstacle courses and training mats covered the floor. 12 men in dark blue training uniforms were already gathered near a set of metal lockers. They looked like they had been carved from stone. Broad shoulders, thick arms, and serious faces. Some had been patrol officers for over 10 years. Others had military backgrounds. All of them had reputations for being tough and fearless. As Sarah walked toward the group, conversation stopped. 12 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her. She could feel their judgment burning into her skin. At 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing 130 pounds, she looked tiny compared to the men around her. Jake Morrison was the first to speak. He was a 10-year veteran known for his aggressive style and quick temper. His dark hair was cut military short and a scar ran across his left cheek from a knife fight with a drug dealer 2 years earlier. "Great, another diversity hire," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Several of the other men chuckled and shook their heads. Rick Thompson elbowed the man next to him. "How long you think she lasts?" he whispered. "My money is on 3 days maximum." Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to turn around and walk out. She wanted to prove them wrong by screaming at them. Instead, she lifted her chin and walked to an empty locker. Her father had taught her that actions spoke louder than words. The locker room door slammed open and Sergeant David Collins walked in. He was a legend in the police department. 22 years on the force, 15 years with the tactical unit. He had been shot twice, stabbed once, and had personally arrested over 300 violent criminals. His gray hair was always perfectly combed and his uniform never had a wrinkle. "Listen up, maggots," he barked in a voice that could wake the dead. "This is the Tactical Response Unit training program. For the next 6 weeks, you will be pushed harder than you have ever been pushed in your life. Half of you will quit before the program is over. The other half might actually become useful." He walked slowly in front of the group, his cold blue eyes studying each person. "We deal with the worst criminals this city has to offer. Armed bank robbers who would rather die than go to prison. Drug dealers who carry military-grade weapons. Kidnappers who see hostages as disposable. When regular patrol officers run away from danger, we run toward it." Sergeant Collins stopped directly in front of Sarah. His stare felt like an X-ray machine examining her soul. "There is no room in this unit for weakness," he continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "There is no room for special treatment. There is no room for people who cannot keep up with the team. When bullets start flying and lives are on the line, every person in this unit must be someone I can trust completely." The message was clear. Sarah was not welcome here. The first week began with physical fitness tests, push-ups, pull-ups, running, and obstacle courses. Sarah had always been in good shape, but she quickly realized that good shape for regular patrol duty was not the same as good shape for tactical unit work. During push-up tests, she managed 45 repetitions while most of the men did 60 or more. Her pull-up count was 12 compared to their 25. On the 2-mile run, she finished in the middle of the group but breathing much harder than the others. The obstacle course was the worst. It required crawling under barbed wire, climbing over 8-foot walls, and carrying a 60-pound dummy for 50 yards. Sarah completed every section, but her times were consistently slower than everyone else. Morrison made sure to comment loudly on every one of her performances. "Look at those push-ups," he would say. "My little sister could do better." During the dummy carry exercise, he timed her with his watch and announced her results to the entire group. 2 minutes and 40 seconds, he called out. The rest of us averaged under 2 minutes. "Hope nobody needs rescuing anytime soon." But Sarah also noticed something the men seemed to ignore. During classroom sessions covering laws, procedures, and tactical planning, she scored higher than most of them on every test. When they studied building layouts and planning entry strategies, she spotted details that others missed. Her mind was sharp and focused even when her body was struggling. The academic portion covered everything from constitutional law to explosive devices. They learned about hostage psychology, drug trafficking patterns, and surveillance techniques. Sarah absorbed every piece of information like a sponge. She stayed late every evening to review notes and study additional materials. Officer Williams, the firearms instructor, noticed her dedication. He was a quiet man who had spent 15 years as a military sniper before joining the police force. After one particularly difficult legal studies session, he approached Sarah. "You are doing good work in the classroom," he told her. "Do not let the others discourage you. Some of the best tactical officers I have known were not the biggest or the strongest. They were the smartest and most determined." His words gave Sarah hope, but they also made the criticism from her classmates harder to bear. Every mistake was magnified. Every struggle was highlighted. When she stumbled during an obstacle course run, Morrison was there to point it out. When she took a few extra seconds to complete a physical challenge, Rick was there to check his watch and shake his head. By the end of the first week, Sarah was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Her body ached from the intense training and her confidence was shattered from the constant negativity. She sat alone in her car after the final session on Friday, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Maybe they were right, she thought to herself. Maybe she was not cut out for this elite unit. Maybe she would get someone killed when it really mattered. The doubt crept into her mind like poison, making her question everything she thought she knew about herself. But as she drove home that night, Sarah remembered why she had wanted this job in the first place. She thought about the victims she had helped as a patrol officer, the families she had protected, the criminals she had arrested. She was not doing this to prove anything to Morrison or Rick or even Sergeant Collins. She was doing this because she believed she could make a difference, because she knew that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person who can save the day when everything goes wrong. Monday morning would bring week 2 of training. Sarah Martinez would be there, ready to face whatever challenges they threw at her. She would prove that being underestimated was not the same thing as being defeated. Week 2 of training began with Sarah arriving at the facility 30 minutes early. She had spent the weekend running extra miles and doing additional push-ups in her apartment. If physical strength was going to be her weakness, she was determined to improve it as much as possible. The other trainees filtered in one by one, their conversations stopping whenever she was near. Morrison and Rick had clearly spent the weekend talking about her performance, because they kept glancing in her direction and whispering to each other. Sergeant Collins entered the training room carrying a large wooden box. Inside were various types of firearms that the tactical unit used in real operations. Handguns, shotguns, assault rifles, and precision sniper rifles. Each weapon was clean and perfectly maintained. "This week we focus on weapons training," he announced to the group. "Every tactical officer must be expert level with multiple types of firearms. In real situations, you might need to use whatever weapon is available. You cannot afford to miss when lives are on the line." Sarah had always been a decent shot with her standard service pistol. During her regular police training 3 years ago, she had qualified without any problems. But she had never used the advanced weapons that the tactical unit carried. The group moved to the shooting range in the basement of the facility. 12 shooting stations were set up with targets at various distances. The closest targets were 25 yards away. The furthest targets were 100 yards down the range. Officer Williams, the firearms instructor, demonstrated proper shooting stance and breathing techniques. He was a thin man with steady hands and calm eyes. His voice was quiet, but every word was important. "Shooting accurately requires complete control of your body and mind," he explained. "Your feet must be planted firmly. Your grip must be consistent. Your breathing must be slow and controlled. Any small mistake will cause you to miss your target completely." He fired 3 shots at a target 50 yards away. All 3 bullets hit within inches of each other in the center ring. The sound of the gunshots echoed through the concrete room. Sarah stepped up to the first shooting station. She picked up a standard pistol and loaded it with practice ammunition. The weight felt familiar in her hands. She aimed at the 25-yard target and fired 5 shots. 4 of the 5 shots hit the target. 3 were in the outer rings and 1 was in the center. It was not perfect, but it was acceptable for a first attempt. "Not bad," Martinez Morrison called out from the station next to her. "Maybe you can hit the broadside of a barn after all." His tone was mocking, but Sarah ignored him and focused on her next set of shots. The training progressed to different types of weapons. Shotguns for close-range situations, semi-automatic rifles for medium distances. Each weapon required different techniques, and Sarah struggled to adjust quickly enough. Her shotgun groupings were scattered across the target. Her rifle shots were inconsistent, sometimes hitting the center and sometimes missing completely. By the end of the morning session, her confidence was lower than it had been all week. The afternoon brought precision rifle training. Officer Williams carried out a heavy sniper rifle and set it up on a special rest. This weapon was designed for long-distance accuracy and required completely different skills than the other firearms. "This rifle is used when we need to neutralize a threat from far away," Williams explained. "Hostage situations where the suspect is holding someone at gunpoint. Barricaded suspects who are shooting at officers. One shot must be perfect because you will not get a second chance." He demonstrated the proper position for long-range shooting. Lying flat on the ground, the rifle supported by a bipod, eye pressed against the scope. His body was completely still as he aimed at a target 100 yards away. The shot was perfect, hitting exactly in the center of the target. Sarah watched carefully as each trainee took their turn with the precision rifle. Some did well, hitting near the center of the target. Others struggled with the unfamiliar weapon and shooting position. When her turn came, Sarah lay down behind the rifle and tried to copy everything Williams had shown them. She pressed her eye against the scope and could see the target clearly magnified. Her heart was beating fast and her hands felt shaky. She took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger slowly, just as she had been taught. The rifle kicked against her shoulder and the sound was much louder than the other weapons. When she looked through the scope again, she could not see where her bullet had hit. Williams walked down to check the target and shook his head. "Complete miss," he announced to the group. Morrison burst out laughing. "Look at that," he said loudly. "She missed the entire target. My grandmother could shoot better than that, and she has been dead for 10 years. The other trainees joined in the laughter. Sarah felt her face turn red with embarrassment and anger. She had never completely missed a target before in her life. Her second shot was also a miss. Her third shot barely hit the edge of the target. By the time she finished her 5 shots, only 2 had actually hit the target, and both were in the outer rings. "Sarah Martinez, ladies and gentlemen," Morrison announced like he was introducing a circus act. "The tactical officer who cannot hit what she is aiming at. I feel so much safer knowing she will be backing me up." The rest of the week continued in the same pattern. Sarah struggled with the advanced weapons while most of the other trainees performed much better. Her pistol shooting remained acceptable, but her rifle work was consistently poor. During combat scenario training, the group practiced room-clearing techniques and responded to simulated emergencies. Sarah understood the tactics perfectly and could explain the procedures better than anyone else. But when it came to the shooting portion, she continued to struggle. Sergeant Collins watched her performance with growing concern. After one particularly bad session where she missed more shots than she hit, he pulled her aside. "Martinez," he said quietly, "this is not working out the way either of us hoped. The tactical unit requires officers who can perform under extreme pressure. If you cannot hit your targets in training, how can I trust you in a real situation where innocent lives are at stake?" Sarah stared at the ground, unable to meet his eyes. "I know I can do better, Sergeant," she said. "I just need more practice." "Practice time is over," Collins replied. "Next week we move to advanced scenarios and live exercises. Either you improve dramatically or you will be removed from the program." That evening, Sarah sat in her car in the facility parking lot for almost an hour. She was close to tears but refused to let them fall. Morrison and Rick walked past her car on their way out, still laughing about her shooting performance. She thought about quitting. It would be easier than facing another week of humiliation and failure. She could go back to regular patrol duty where she had been successful and respected, but something deep inside her refused to give up. Sarah drove home and called her father, a retired military man who had taught her to shoot when she was a child growing up on their family ranch in Texas. "Dad," she said when he answered the phone, "I think I am in trouble." I am failing at something I thought I could do well. Her father listened quietly as she explained about the tactical unit training and her struggles with the precision shooting. When she finished talking, he was silent for a long moment. Sarah, he finally said, "Do you remember what I taught you about shooting when you were 12 years old? It is not about being the biggest or the strongest person. It is not about showing off or trying to impress other people. Shooting is about finding that quiet place inside yourself where nothing else matters except you and the target." She remembered those lessons from years ago, long summer days on the ranch, learning to shoot tin cans off fence posts, her father teaching her patience and breathing control. "Tomorrow, forget about those other trainees and their comments," he continued. "Forget about trying to prove anything to anyone else. Just focus on what you know how to do. Trust your training and trust yourself." After hanging up the phone, Sarah felt something change inside her. She had been so focused on what Morrison and the others thought about her that she had lost sight of her own abilities. She spent that evening cleaning her service weapon and practicing dry fire exercises in her apartment. No ammunition, just the mechanics of aiming and trigger control, over and over until the movements became automatic. Monday morning would bring week 3 of training. Sarah Martinez would face the precision rifle again. But this time she would approach it differently. This time she would remember who she really was and what she was truly capable of achieving. The woman they were all counting out was about to surprise everyone, including herself. Monday morning arrived with dark clouds covering the sky and a light rain tapping against the windows of the training facility. Sarah walked through the doors with a different energy than she had carried in previous weeks. Her father's words echoed in her mind like a steady drumbeat. Find that quiet place inside yourself. The other trainees were already gathered around the equipment table, examining the weapons they would be using for week 3 training. Morrison was holding a precision rifle and pretending to aim it at different objects around the room while making shooting sounds with his mouth. "Bang, bang," he said, pointing the unloaded weapon at a water fountain. Another perfect shot by Officer Morrison. The crowd goes wild. Rick and 2 other trainees laughed at his performance. Sarah ignored their noise and walked directly to Officer Williams. The firearms instructor was checking each weapon carefully, making sure they were clean and properly adjusted. "Officer Williams," she said quietly, "could I get some extra practice time with the precision rifles today? I want to work on my technique before we start the group exercises." Williams looked at her with surprise. Most trainees tried to avoid extra work, especially with the weapons they found most difficult. "You can have 30 minutes before the official session starts," he told her. "But remember, the fundamentals are more important than the number of shots you take." Sarah nodded and picked up one of the rifles. It felt heavy in her hands but not uncomfortable. She carried it to shooting station number 12, the one furthest from where the other trainees were talking and joking around. She lay down behind the rifle and set it up exactly as Williams had demonstrated. Bipod legs extended, rifle stock pressed firmly against her shoulder, cheek resting against the stock in the same position every time. Instead of immediately looking through the scope, Sarah closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. In through her nose slowly, hold for 3 seconds, out through her mouth even more slowly. Her father had taught her this technique when she was 12 years old. After 2 minutes of controlled breathing, she opened her eyes and looked through the scope. The target 100 yards away appeared crystal clear in the magnified view. She could see every line and number on the paper target. Sarah placed the crosshairs exactly in the center of the target and began her breathing cycle again. Breathe in, let half the air out, hold steady, and slowly squeeze the trigger. The rifle fired, and she immediately looked through the scope to see where the bullet hit. Perfect center. Dead on target. She could hardly believe it. After missing completely so many times last week, her first shot of the day was exactly where she had aimed. Sarah took another deep breath and prepared for her second shot. Another perfect hit, less than an inch from the first bullet hole. By the time the other trainees arrived at the shooting range, Sarah had fired 20 shots and 19 of them were clustered in a tight group in the center of the target. Her hands were steady and her confidence was growing with each shot. Morrison walked past her station and glanced at her target. His cocky smile faded when he saw the grouping of bullet holes. "Must be a lucky day," he muttered, but his voice lacked its usual smugness. Officer Williams called the group to attention and explained the advanced marksmanship exercises they would be performing. The targets were smaller than last week. The distances were greater, and they had less time to take each shot. Each trainee will fire 10 shots at targets ranging from 75 yards to 150 yards, Williams announced. You will have different shooting positions for each distance. Some shots will be taken while lying down, some while kneeling, and some while standing with no support. This was the type of shooting that tactical officers faced in real situations. No perfect conditions, no unlimited time to aim, no second chances if they missed. Sarah volunteered to go first. The other trainees seemed surprised by her eagerness, especially after her poor performance the previous week. Morrison whispered something to Rick that made both of them snicker. She approached the 75-yard line and took her position lying flat on the ground. The target looked much smaller than the ones they had used for practice. Through her scope, the center ring appeared to be the size of a tennis ball. Sarah went through her breathing routine and blocked out all the noise around her. She could not hear Morrison's comments or Rick's whispers or even the sound of rain on the roof. The only things that existed were her rifle, the target, and her controlled breathing. The first shot hit exactly where she aimed. The second shot hit even closer to the center. By the time she finished all 10 shots at the 75-yard distance, every bullet had hit within the center ring of the target. Williams walked down to check her target and raised his eyebrows in surprise. Perfect score, he announced to the group. 10 out of 10 shots in the center ring. The 90-yard shooting position required her to kneel with no support for the rifle, except her hands. This was much more difficult because any small movement would cause the gun to sway and miss the target. Sarah knelt down and brought the rifle to her shoulder. Her muscles had to work harder to keep the weapon steady, but her breathing remained calm and controlled. She felt like she was back on her father's ranch, shooting at tin cans while he watched and gave gentle corrections. Shot after shot found the center of the target. Her grouping at 90 yards was even tighter than at 75 yards. Williams shook his head in amazement as he examined the target. Impossible, he said under his breath. Nobody improves this much in one weekend. The most difficult test was the 150-yard standing position. No support at all for the rifle. Shooting at a target that looked like a dot through the scope, with a time limit of 2 minutes for all 10 shots. Most of the other trainees struggled badly with this exercise. Morrison managed to hit the target 6 times out of 10, but only 2 of his shots were anywhere near the center. Rick hit the target 4 times and missed it completely on 6 shots. When Sarah stepped up to the 150-yard line, the entire group went quiet. Even Sergeant Collins, who had been working with other training equipment, stopped to watch her performance. Sarah took her standing position and brought the rifle up to her shoulder. The target was barely visible even through the powerful scope. Any small movement of her hands would cause the crosshairs to jump several inches on the target. She closed her eyes for 10 seconds and found that quiet place her father had taught her about. When she opened her eyes and looked through the scope, everything else disappeared. No other people, no pressure, no time limit, just her and the distant target. The first shot hit dead center. The second shot hit so close to the first that it actually touched the same hole. Sarah was no longer thinking about each shot individually. She was in what athletes call the zone, where everything flows naturally and perfectly. Shot 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Every single bullet hit within an area smaller than a silver dollar on a target 150 yards away. Williams walked the full distance to check her target and then walked back, shaking his head. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the stunned group, "we have just witnessed the best single shooting performance in the history of this training program." The shooting range was completely silent. Morrison stared at Sarah like he was seeing her for the first time. Rick's mouth was hanging open. Even Sergeant Collins had stopped his work and was looking at the target results with surprise. Sarah carefully placed the rifle back on the equipment table and walked toward the exit. She did not celebrate or boast about her performance. She simply nodded to Officer Williams and headed to the locker room. As she changed out of her shooting gear, Sarah smiled to herself. She had found that quiet place inside herself that her father had told her about. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she belonged in this program. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new tests. But Sarah Martinez now knew something that she had forgotten during the difficult first 2 weeks of training. She was not just good enough to be here. She might actually be better than anyone had imagined, including herself. The woman they had dismissed as a weakness was about to become their greatest strength. The 4th week of training began with a different atmosphere in the facility. Word about Sarah's incredible shooting performance had spread throughout the building. Other instructors kept finding excuses to walk past the training room and get a look at the woman who had broken the marksmanship record. Morrison arrived at the facility 15 minutes late, which was unusual for him. His confidence seemed shaken and he avoided making eye contact with Sarah. Rick still made occasional comments, but they lacked the cruel edge they had carried in previous weeks. Sergeant Collins gathered the group around a large table covered with building blueprints, floor plans, and photographs. This week would be different from anything they had experienced so far. Real-world scenarios, he announced in his commanding voice. Everything you have learned up to this point has been preparation for these exercises. Starting today, you will face the same situations that tactical officers encounter on the street. Bank robberies, hostage situations, armed suspects in buildings, and rooftop sniper scenarios. He pointed to a complex diagram showing a 3-story office building. This facility has been specially designed to simulate real tactical operations. Hidden speakers will play sounds of gunfire, screaming civilians, and radio chatter. Smoke machines will reduce visibility. Moving targets will appear without warning. Your decisions in these scenarios could mean the difference between life and death in the real world. The first exercise was a bank robbery response. 2 trainees would work as a team to neutralize armed suspects holding hostages inside a mock bank. The scenario used paintball weapons that fired paint-filled pellets instead of real bullets. Getting hit by a paintball meant you were wounded or killed in the simulation. Morrison volunteered to go first, paired with a trainee named Davis. They studied the bank layout for 10 minutes and then entered the building with their paintball weapons ready. Through speakers placed around the facility, everyone could hear what was happening inside. Loud voices shouting demands, the sound of crying hostages, and radio calls for backup. Morrison and Davis moved through the bank quickly, trying to locate the suspects. Suddenly, there were sounds of paintball guns firing rapidly. Morrison's voice came over the radio, angry and frustrated. "I am hit," he reported. Davis lasted 30 seconds longer before his voice also reported being eliminated. When they exited the building, both men were covered in bright red paint splatters. Morrison's face was dark with embarrassment. The automated scoring system announced that they had successfully neutralized 1 suspect but had failed to save 3 hostages who were killed during the operation. 2 more teams attempted the same scenario with similar results. The exercise was designed to be extremely difficult, and most trainees struggled with the pressure and complexity. When Sarah was called to participate, she was paired with Officer Chen, a quiet man who had served in the military before becoming a police officer. Chen was one of the few trainees who had never made negative comments about her presence in the program. They studied the bank layout carefully. Sarah noticed details that the previous teams had missed: emergency exits, blind corners where suspects might hide, and sight lines that would allow for precise shots without endangering hostages. "We should enter from 2 different directions," she suggested to Chen. "If we both go through the front door, we will be easy targets. You take the main entrance and I will go through the side door. That way we can catch them between us." Chen nodded in agreement. He had learned to respect her tactical thinking during classroom sessions. They entered the mock bank simultaneously from opposite sides. The sounds were overwhelming. Shouting voices, alarm bells, and radio static filled the air. Smoke machines made it difficult to see more than a few feet in any direction. Sarah moved carefully along the wall, her paintball rifle ready but not rushed. She controlled her breathing exactly as she had learned to do on the shooting range. Through the smoke, she could see the outlines of cardboard figures representing hostages and suspects. A suspect figure popped up from behind a counter, holding a cardboard hostage in front of him. This was the most difficult shot in the scenario. Miss the suspect and hit the hostage, and the exercise would be a failure. Sarah had less than 3 seconds to make the decision and take the shot. She found her quiet zone instantly. Everything around her seemed to slow down. The shouting voices faded to a whisper. The smoke cleared in her vision. Her hands were perfectly steady as she aimed. The paintball hit the suspect figure exactly in the head, avoiding the hostage completely. 1 threat eliminated. Chen's voice came over the radio. "I have 2 suspects cornered in the vault area, but I cannot get a clean shot without endangering civilians." Sarah moved quickly but carefully through the building. She found a position on the 2nd-floor balcony that gave her a clear view of the vault area below. 2 suspect figures were positioned behind a group of hostage figures, making any shot extremely difficult. Through her scope, Sarah could see a narrow gap between the suspects and the hostages. The shot would require perfect accuracy from 40 yards away at a downward angle. Most shooters would not even attempt such a difficult target. Sarah steadied her rifle against the balcony railing and controlled her breathing. The first shot hit the left suspect perfectly. Before the cardboard figure had even finished falling, she had already shifted her aim to the second suspect. Her second shot was equally perfect. Exercise completed came the announcement over the loudspeaker. All suspects neutralized, all hostages saved. Perfect score. Chen looked up at the balcony where Sarah was positioned and gave her a thumbs-up sign. Even through the smoke and confusion, he had been amazed by her precision. The next scenario was even more challenging. A rooftop sniper situation where suspects had taken positions on top of a 5-story building and were threatening to shoot at police officers and civilians in the street below. This exercise required extreme long-distance shooting under pressure. The targets were 200 yards away, partially hidden behind rooftop equipment and moving randomly every few seconds. 4 teams had attempted the scenario before Sarah's turn. All 4 teams had failed to neutralize the threats within the time limit. Morrison and his partner had missed all of their shots completely. Rick's team had hit the building but not the actual targets. Sarah was paired with Officer Martinez, no relation despite sharing the same last name. Martinez was nervous about the exercise because his own shooting skills were only average. "I will handle the long-distance shots," Sarah told him as they prepared for the scenario. "You watch for threats that might be closer and cover my back while I am focused on the rooftop targets." They took positions on the roof of a neighboring building. Through her scope, Sarah could barely see the suspect figures 200 yards away. The wind was blowing steadily, which would affect the path of the paintballs. The targets were moving unpredictably every 10 to 15 seconds. This was the most difficult shot she had ever attempted. Missing would mean that the suspects could continue threatening innocent people. In a real situation, lives would depend on her accuracy. Sarah watched the movement pattern of the targets for 30 seconds. She calculated the wind speed and direction. She found her breathing rhythm and settled into her shooting position. The first target appeared from behind an air conditioning unit. Sarah had perhaps 5 seconds before it would move again. She led the target slightly to account for its movement and the wind, then squeezed the trigger smoothly. Direct hit. The target went down immediately. The second target had seen its partner fall and was now moving more erratically, trying to find better cover. Sarah tracked it through her scope, waiting for the right moment. When the target paused for just 3 seconds to look around a rooftop structure, Sarah was ready. Her second shot was perfect, hitting the figure in the center mass. Scenario completed. Both suspects neutralized. 0 civilian casualties. Martinez stared at Sarah with amazement. "I have never seen shooting like that in my life," he said quietly. Those were impossible shots under impossible conditions. As they walked back to the main facility, other trainees and instructors stopped to watch Sarah pass. Word was spreading quickly that something special was happening in the tactical training program. Sergeant Collins was waiting for them at the entrance. His expression was unreadable, but there was something different in the way he looked at Sarah. For the first time since training began, there was no doubt or skepticism in his eyes. "Martinez," he said as she walked past, "I want to see you in my office after the session ends today." Sarah nodded, wondering if she was in trouble for something or if this meeting would be about her performance. Either way, she was no longer the weak link that everyone expected to quit. She had become the person that others looked to when the situation seemed impossible. The woman they said would hold them back was now the one holding them together. Sarah knocked on Sergeant Collins' office door at exactly 5 o'clock. The meeting she had been thinking about all afternoon was finally here. Through the frosted glass window, she could see his silhouette sitting behind a large metal desk, covered with papers and training reports. "Come in," Collins called out in his usual commanding voice. The office was small and practical. No decorations except for a single photograph of Collins in military uniform from his younger days. Awards and certificates covered one wall, showing his 22 years of distinguished service. "Sit down, Martinez," he said, pointing to a metal chair across from his desk. Sarah sat down and waited for him to speak. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her back was straight and her eyes met his directly. Collins studied her for a long moment without saying anything. Finally, he opened a folder and pulled out several sheets of paper covered with numbers and scores. I have been reviewing your performance over the past 4 weeks. He began slowly. Your physical fitness scores are adequate but not exceptional. Your classroom work is outstanding. Your tactical planning skills are among the best I have seen in 15 years of running this program. He paused and looked at another sheet of paper. But your marksmanship scores are something completely different. In 22 years of police work, I have never seen anyone shoot with the precision you displayed this week. Your scores are not just better than the other trainees. They are better than most of our active tactical officers. Sarah remained silent, unsure if this was praise or the beginning of some kind of criticism. Tomorrow is graduation day, Collins continued. One final exercise that will test everything you have learned. It is designed to be the ultimate challenge that combines all your skills under maximum pressure. Pass this test and you become a full member of the Tactical Response Unit. Fail this test and you go back to regular patrol duty. He leaned forward in his chair and his voice became more serious. I want you to understand something, Martinez. This final exercise has a 40% failure rate. Good officers who performed well throughout the program have failed this test and been eliminated from the unit. Sarah nodded to show she understood the gravity of what he was telling her. The test is conducted individually, Collins explained. Each trainee faces a complex scenario alone with no backup and no second chances. You will have multiple threats, innocent civilians, time pressure, and decisions that must be made in seconds. One mistake can result in the death of hostages or fellow officers in the simulation. He stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the training facility. The other trainees were still working on equipment maintenance and studying for tomorrow's final exam. I am going to be honest with you, Martinez. 3 weeks ago, I wanted you out of this program. I thought you were a liability who would get someone killed in a real situation. I was wrong about you. You have shown me that excellence comes in forms I did not expect. Collins turned back to face her. Tomorrow you will prove whether you truly belong in this unit, or if your recent performance was just temporary luck. The final exercise will show us who you really are when everything is on the line. Sarah left the meeting with mixed feelings. She was encouraged by Collins' respect for her abilities, but nervous about facing a test with such a high failure rate. That evening she called her father again. Dad, she said when he answered, tomorrow is the big test. I am scared that I might fail when it really matters. Her father's voice was calm and reassuring. Sarah, you have already proven everything you need to prove. Tomorrow just be yourself and trust in all the training you have received. Remember that quiet place we talked about. When you find that place, nothing else matters except doing what you know how to do. The final day of training arrived with bright sunshine and clear skies. All 12 remaining trainees gathered in the main facility at 6 in the morning. Over the past 5 weeks, 2 trainees had quit the program and were replaced by alternates. Sergeant Collins stood in front of the group wearing his dress uniform instead of training clothes. Today was official graduation day for those who passed the final exercise. Gentlemen and lady, he announced formally, today you face the ultimate test of your tactical abilities. Each of you will enter a specially designed scenario that simulates the most challenging situations our unit encounters. You will have no assistance and no communication with anyone outside the exercise area. He pointed to a large building that had been constructed specifically for this final test. Inside that facility is a multi-level structure with multiple rooms, hidden passages, and surprise elements. You will face armed suspects, innocent hostages, and situations that change without warning. The exercise was timed and scored by computer systems that tracked every movement and decision. Shooting accuracy, tactical choices, time to complete objectives, and safety of civilians were all measured and recorded. Morrison volunteered to go first, as he had done throughout the program. His confidence had returned somewhat after Sarah's meeting with Collins, and he wanted to prove that he was still the strongest candidate. 45 minutes later, Morrison emerged from the building looking exhausted and frustrated. His score was displayed on a large electronic board visible to everyone. 72%, a passing grade but not impressive. Rick followed with a score of 68%, barely passing the minimum requirement. One by one, the other trainees completed the exercise with scores ranging from 65 to 78%. 2 trainees failed completely. Officer Davis scored only 54% after making critical errors that resulted in multiple civilian casualties in the simulation. Officer Thompson scored 57%, and was also eliminated from the program. When Sarah's name was called, she was the last trainee to attempt the exercise. Everyone gathered around the viewing area to watch her performance on closed-circuit monitors. She entered the building carrying a tactical rifle, sidearm, and radio equipment. The scenario began immediately with sounds of gunfire and shouting voices coming from multiple directions. Sarah moved methodically through the first floor, clearing each room using proper tactical procedures. When she encountered her first suspect holding a hostage, she took the difficult shot without hesitation. Perfect accuracy, hostage saved. The scenario escalated quickly. Multiple suspects on different floors, civilians running in panic and changing objectives communicated through her radio. Sarah adapted to each new challenge calmly and effectively. The most difficult moment came when she reached the third floor. 6 hostages were being held by 3 armed suspects in a large open room. The suspects were positioned so that any direct assault would result in civilian casualties. Sarah studied the situation for 30 seconds, looking for options that others might miss. She noticed a ventilation shaft that led to a position above the suspects. It would be a difficult shot at a steep downward angle, but it was the only way to save all the hostages. She climbed through the ventilation system and positioned herself directly above the room. Through a small grate, she could see all 3 suspects and 6 hostages below her. This was the moment that would define her entire future. 3 shots that had to be perfect under the most difficult conditions imaginable. Sarah found her quiet place. Everything else disappeared except her rifle, her targets, and her controlled breathing. The first shot neutralized the left suspect. The second shot eliminated the center suspect. The third shot took down the final threat. All hostages saved. All suspects neutralized. Exercise completed in record time. When Sarah emerged from the building, the electronic scoreboard displayed her results. 96%. The highest score in the history of the final exercise. The group of trainees and instructors stood in stunned silence. Even Sergeant Collins appeared amazed by her performance. Morrison approached Sarah as she removed her tactical gear. His expression was completely different from the arrogance he had shown 5 weeks earlier. "Martinez," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you from day one. You are not someone who will hold this unit back. You are someone who will make all of us better at our jobs." Rick nodded in agreement. "When we are out there facing real situations," he said, "I would be honored to have you watching my back." One by one, the other trainees and instructors congratulated Sarah on her achievement. She had not only passed the program, but had set new standards for excellence. Sergeant Collins called the group to attention for the final ceremony. Of the 12 candidates who began this program, 10 have successfully completed all requirements, he announced. "You are now certified tactical response officers." He paused and looked directly at Sarah. "However, one officer has demonstrated exceptional ability that deserves special recognition. Officer Martinez will be assigned as our unit's primary precision marksman, a position that requires the highest level of skill and responsibility." 1 year after graduation, Sarah Martinez had become a legend in the police department. Her precision shooting had saved 17 lives in various tactical operations. Other police units from neighboring cities requested her assistance with their most difficult cases. The woman who had once been dismissed as a weakness was now considered the department's greatest asset. On a cold Tuesday morning in November, Sarah arrived at the tactical unit headquarters to find unusual activity. Extra vehicles filled the parking lot, and officers she did not recognize were gathered in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Something big was happening. Sergeant Collins met her at the entrance with a grim expression on his face. "Martinez, we have a situation," he said without his usual greeting. "The kind of situation that will test everything you have learned and more." He led her to the command center where multiple computer screens displayed maps, building layouts, and live video feeds. FBI agents in dark suits stood alongside local detectives and tactical officers from 3 different cities. A federal agent named Williams stepped forward to brief the assembled team. At approximately 4 this morning, armed suspects took control of the Riverside Elementary School. "We believe there are at least 6 heavily armed men inside the building with approximately 200 children and 20 teachers as hostages." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. A school full of children was every tactical officer's worst nightmare. The stakes could not be higher, and the margin for error was 0. Agent Williams continued his briefing. The suspects are demanding the release of their leader, who is currently in federal prison. They claim to have explosive devices throughout the building and have threatened to start killing hostages if their demands are not met within 6 hours. He pointed to aerial photographs of the school building. The structure is 2 stories tall with multiple entrances and over 30 classrooms. We have confirmed that all exits are barricaded from the inside. The suspects have positioned themselves strategically to watch all approaches to the building. Sergeant Collins studied the layout carefully. This is going to require a coordinated assault from multiple directions, he said. We will need our best people in every position. Agent Williams nodded in agreement. We have tactical teams from 4 different agencies working together on this operation. However, we have one critical problem that requires a very specific skill set. He pointed to a highlighted area on the building diagram. One of the suspects has positioned himself in the second-floor library with approximately 40 children. He has a clear view of the main entrance and the playground where parents and media have gathered. From this position, he can see any approaching officers and has threatened to start shooting children if he spots any tactical movement. Sarah realized where this briefing was heading before Williams finished speaking. We need someone who can neutralize this threat from an extreme long distance without being detected, Williams continued. The shot would be approximately 300 yards through a second-story window, while avoiding harm to any of the children in the room. 300 yards was far beyond what most tactical officers could handle accurately. It was the kind of shot that required not just skill but nerves of steel under unimaginable pressure. Collins looked directly at Sarah. Martinez, this is what you have been training for your entire career, but I want you to understand something. If you miss this shot, children will die. If you are detected before taking the shot, children will die. The entire success of this rescue operation may depend on your ability to make one perfect shot under the worst possible conditions. Sarah took a deep breath and studied the building layouts and photographs. The distance was manageable if she could find the right shooting position. The real challenge would be making the shot while children were in the same room as the target. Where would I be positioned for the shot, she asked Williams. He led her to a window that overlooked the school building 3 blocks away. There is an office building with roof access that provides a clear sight line to the library window. However, the angle is difficult and you would be shooting slightly upward through glass. Sarah looked through a pair of binoculars at the school building. She could see the second-floor library window clearly. It was a challenging shot, but not impossible if everything went perfectly. How much time do I have to prepare, she asked. Williams checked his watch. The suspect's deadline is in 4 hours. We want to begin the assault in 3 hours to allow time for the operation. That gives you approximately 2 hours to get into position and prepare for the shot. The next 2 hours passed quickly as Sarah prepared for the most important shot of her career. She studied detailed building plans, wind reports, and photographs of the library interior. Every detail had to be perfect because there would be no second chances. Her rifle was carefully calibrated and tested at a nearby shooting range. The scope was adjusted precisely for the distance and angle she would face. Special ammunition was selected that would provide maximum accuracy while minimizing the risk of over-penetration that might harm children. Morrison and Rick, her former critics who had become trusted colleagues, helped her prepare equipment and reviewed the tactical plan. Both men had volunteered to be part of the assault team that would enter the building after Sarah neutralized the library threat. You have got this, Martinez Morrison said as she prepared to leave. For the shooting position, we have all seen what you can do when it matters most. Rick nodded in agreement. Those children are counting on you to do what nobody else can do. Sarah arrived at the office building and made her way to the roof. The shooting position offered a clear view of the school library window, but the angle was even more challenging than she had expected. She would be shooting through 2 panes of glass at a target 300 yards away while children moved around in the background. She set up her rifle on a specially designed rest and looked through the powerful scope. Inside the library, she could see approximately 40 children sitting on the floor in small groups. Teachers were positioned around the room trying to keep the children calm. The suspect was a tall man wearing dark clothing and carrying an assault rifle. He moved constantly around the room, sometimes standing near the windows and sometimes walking among the children. Sarah would have to wait for the perfect moment when he was isolated from any children who might be harmed. Her radio crackled with updates from the command center. "All assault teams are in position," came Colin's voice. "Martinez, you are authorized to take the shot when you have a clear target." Sarah controlled her breathing and found her quiet place. Everything around her faded away except the view through her scope. She watched the suspect's movement pattern and waited for the right opportunity. Minutes felt like hours as she tracked the target through her scope. The man paused near the window, looking out at the police vehicles surrounding the school. For just a moment, he was positioned away from all the children with a clear shot available. This was the moment that would define not just her career, but the lives of 40 innocent children. Sarah's finger found the trigger. Her breathing was perfectly controlled. Her hands were rock steady despite the enormous pressure. The crosshairs were centered exactly where they needed to be. The shot had to be perfect. There was no room for error. Everything she had learned and trained for led to this single moment. The rifle fired and Sarah immediately looked through the scope to see the result. The suspect had fallen instantly and was no longer a threat. None of the children appeared to be harmed. "Target neutralized," she reported over the radio with calm professionalism that hid the emotions flooding through her. Within minutes, tactical teams breached the school building from multiple entrances. The remaining suspects were captured or eliminated without harm to any of the hostages. All 200 children and 20 teachers were rescued safely. As Sarah packed up her equipment, she received a radio message from Sergeant Collins. "Martinez, because of your shot, every single child in that school is going home to their families tonight. That is what being the best really means." Later that evening, Sarah sat in her apartment thinking about the day's events. She had proven once again that being underestimated had made her stronger and more determined. The woman they said would hold everyone back had just saved 200 innocent lives with one perfect shot. Her phone rang and she saw it was her father calling. "From the family ranch in Texas, I saw the news about the school rescue," he said when she answered. "I am so proud of what you have become, Sarah. You found that quiet place inside yourself and used it to save all those children." Sarah smiled as she remembered the little girl she had been, learning to shoot tin cans off fence posts while her father taught her patience and precision. She had come a long way from those simple lessons on the ranch. But the most important things her father had taught her about finding inner strength and staying calm under pressure had never changed. The next morning, Sarah returned to headquarters to find her desk covered with thank you cards from the families of the rescued children, drawings from young students, letters from grateful parents, and flowers from teachers filled her workspace. 2 years after the school rescue that made her a national hero, Sarah Martinez received an unexpected assignment that would change her career once again. Sergeant Collins called her into his office on a bright Monday morning with news that would take her in a completely different direction. "Martinez," he said as she sat down across from his desk, "I have been asked to recommend someone for a very special position. The police academy wants to create a new advanced tactical training program. They need someone to design and lead the most demanding course in the academy's history." Sarah listened carefully as Collins explained the opportunity. The program would train the next generation of tactical officers using the most advanced techniques and realistic scenarios available. It would be based on everything she had learned during her own training and the real-world operations she had experienced. "They specifically requested you." Collins continued, "Word about your abilities has spread throughout law enforcement. Departments from across the country want to send their best candidates to learn from the officer who has redefined what tactical precision means. The position would mean leaving active duty and becoming a full-time instructor at the police academy. Sarah would be responsible for creating curriculum, training new officers, and sharing the knowledge she had gained through years of high-pressure operations. It is a big decision, Collins said. You would be giving up field work to focus entirely on teaching. But think about the impact you could have. Instead of saving lives one operation at a time, you could train hundreds of officers who would go on to save thousands of lives throughout their careers. Sarah asked for time to consider the offer. That evening, she called her father to discuss the opportunity and get his advice about this major career change. Teaching is one of the most important jobs anyone can do, her father told her over the phone. You have learned things that most people will never understand. If you can pass that knowledge on to others, you will multiply your impact many times over. After 3 days of careful consideration, Sarah accepted the position. She would become the head instructor for the new, advanced tactical training program at the State Police Academy. Her first challenge was designing a curriculum that would properly prepare officers for the realities they would face on the street. Sarah wanted to avoid the mistakes that had been made during her own training when instructors focused too much on physical strength and not enough on mental preparation and tactical thinking. She spent weeks reviewing training programs from around the world, studying the latest research on stress psychology, and analyzing data from hundreds of tactical operations. The program she designed would be unlike anything that had been attempted before. The first class of the advanced tactical training program began 6 months later with 24 carefully selected officers from 12 different police departments. Unlike Sarah's original training group, this class included 8 women and 16 men representing diverse backgrounds and experience levels. Sarah stood in front of the group on their first morning, wearing her instructor uniform, with the rank of lieutenant that came with her new position. She looked at the faces staring back at her and remembered her own first day of training 3 years earlier. "Welcome to the Advanced Tactical Training Program," she began. "Over the next 8 weeks, you will be challenged in ways you have never experienced before. This program has a 50% completion rate because we maintain the highest standards in law enforcement." She paused and made eye contact with several trainees, including a young woman named Officer Davis who reminded Sarah of herself at that age. "However, this program is different from traditional tactical training in one important way," Sarah continued. "We believe that excellence comes in many different forms. Physical strength is important, but mental toughness is more important. Size and speed matter, but accuracy and decision-making matter more." The curriculum Sarah had designed included all the traditional elements of tactical training: physical fitness, weapons proficiency, building clearing techniques, and high-stress scenarios. But she had added components that addressed the psychological aspects of tactical work that were often overlooked. She taught classes on controlling fear under pressure, maintaining accuracy when adrenaline was high, and making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. These were lessons she had learned through painful experience during her own training and career. One of her innovations was the use of virtual reality technology that allowed trainees to experience incredibly realistic scenarios without actual danger. Officers could practice difficult shots, room-clearing techniques, and hostage rescue operations in simulated environments that felt completely real. The virtual reality system could recreate the exact conditions Sarah had faced during the school hostage situation. Trainees experienced the pressure of making a 300-yard shot to save children while feeling the stress and responsibility that came with such life-or-death decisions. Officer Davis struggled with the advanced marksmanship portion of the training, just as Sarah had years earlier. Her physical fitness scores were excellent, and her tactical knowledge was outstanding. But she could not seem to find consistency with precision shooting. After watching Davis miss several shots during a practice session, Sarah approached her with advice that had once changed her own career. "Davis," she said quietly so the other trainees could not hear, "you are trying too hard to impress everyone else. Forget about what the other officers think and focus on what you know how to do." That evening, Sarah worked individually with Davis on breathing techniques and mental preparation. She shared the lessons her father had taught her about finding that quiet place inside yourself, where external pressure could not reach. The next day, Davis' performance improved dramatically. Her shot groupings became tighter and her confidence grew with each successful hit. Sarah watched with satisfaction as another officer discovered her true potential. 3 weeks into the program, Sarah faced her first real test as an instructor. A trainee named Officer Thompson began making the same type of dismissive comments about the female officers that Morrison had made during Sarah's training. "These women are going to get someone killed," Thompson said loudly during a break between exercises. "When the shooting starts, do you really want someone who cannot keep up watching your back?" Sarah had been waiting for this moment since the program began. She knew that allowing such attitudes to continue would poison the entire training environment and potentially harm the careers of capable officers. "Thompson," she said in a voice that commanded attention from the entire group, "you seem to have concerns about the abilities of some of your fellow trainees. Would you like to demonstrate your superior skills in a shooting competition?" Thompson eagerly accepted the challenge, confident that he could outshoot any of the women in the program. Sarah set up a precision shooting test that required 10 shots at various distances under time pressure. Thompson went first and achieved a respectable score of 85% accuracy. He was clearly proud of his performance and made several comments about showing everyone how real tactical shooting was done. Davis volunteered to shoot next. Using the technique Sarah had taught her, she achieved 92% accuracy. Her shots were more precise and consistent than Thompson's despite the pressure of being watched by the entire group. But Sarah was not finished with the lesson. "Thompson," she said, "I would like you to compete against me in the same shooting test." The training facility went completely silent. Thompson had no idea about Sarah's reputation or her record-breaking performances during her own training. He agreed to the competition thinking he would easily defeat a female instructor. Sarah approached the shooting line with the same calm confidence she had carried into hundreds of tactical situations. She found her quiet place and blocked out everything except her rifle and the distant targets. Her first shot was perfect center. Her second shot hit the same hole. By the time she finished all 10 shots, she had achieved 100% accuracy with a grouping smaller than a silver dollar. Thompson stared at the target in disbelief. He had never seen shooting of such precision under pressure. Sarah addressed the entire group with a lesson that went far beyond marksmanship. "Excellence in tactical operations is not about meeting other people's expectations," she said. "It is about exceeding your own expectations and supporting your teammates in doing the same." She looked directly at Thompson as she continued. "The officer standing next to you in a dangerous situation may not look like what you expected a tactical officer to look like. They may be smaller, younger, different in ways that surprise you, but if they have earned their place on the team, they deserve your respect and support." The incident with Thompson became a turning point for the entire program. The trainees began working together more effectively and supporting each other regardless of their backgrounds or physical differences.